Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so the discussion today will be about the Utilities Commission, and the Utilities Commission has been reinstated about a year ago. We actually started in June of last year, and it had been suspended, I think, since 2016. That's about when it got over. So the primary thing that I believe it was put back together for was everyone's frustration with the lack of cellular coverage within New Canaan. And I think that's very interesting because I don't even think the cell phone service guys are a utility, but that's the focus that we've got. I put these up here so people would not fall asleep while I actually talk about other stuff besides coverage, but these are a couple of coverage maps. And these are a couple of coverage maps of Verizon, and this was actually from 2014. And so we'll come back to that. And I think one of the things that's interesting is I'll show you the coverage that we have today, at least according to the Connecticut Siting Council, at the end of the presentation here. And there's been a lot of progress made in coverage, and I think it's been a little bit painful along the way. After I volunteered and took this job, I talked to Tom Townsend, that was the person in charge up through 2016. And he said, you're going to have to move out of town after you finish. So I take that as a warning. But first of all, I thought we should just start out with what's the mission of our commission. And Kathleen will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm taking this directly from the ordinance. Okay. So our mission is to help ensure safe, reliable, and efficient utility services for the residents and businesses of New Canaan. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. But then the harder question is, what's a utility? And so they defined that. They defined it they defined it by shall include but not be limited to telecommunication services, energy services, and water services that are provided or could be provided to residents and businesses of the town of New Canaan. And I think that's a pretty good way to do it, to define what you actually want us to go work on. But I think it's also useful to think about what is a utility. And I said earlier, I don't think cell phones are a utility in New Canaan. There's a competitive market. We've got 4 or 5 people competing in it. We're not licensing them actually within New Canaan. They get licensed to put up towers or operate actually at the state and federal level. They buy their authorizations from the FCC, who is in charge of the whole thing. But we all feel like we should get involved in it, and I think the question is why do we feel that way? And I'll come back to that, but I think that's very interesting. So what are we going to do? Given those missions, what are we going to do? We're going to advise the selectmen and the town council on optimizing services available from utilities to the town residents. And my definition of optimizing means we intend to try and drive the service levels to those that enhance property values. And that's just a great measure of it. And to the extent we don't provide services and it pulls the property values down and does not make our real estate valuable, that's a problem. But you can also overinvest and overmanage, right? If you got too many services, etc. And I just ask you to think for a minute about what services don't we have in town? What services do we have in town? And we have a real mixture. If you take a look at the 3 that we're talking about, we talked about cell phones. Not sure that's a utility, but it's something that is very required by the town, and it's something that individuals can't actually provide themselves. But you take a look at water, and water, we provide water to maybe 40% of the town, something like that, through a utility. And that is a real true utility, right? It's a monopoly, and they're the guys that could do it. But if you don't want to be there, you can drill your own well, and away you go. So that is one way to look at a utility is when you buy a house on 4 acres or that is not hooked up to utilities, I don't believe the town has to feel obligated to provide those utilities to those people. They do what they got when they bought it. The interesting thing about cell phones is I'm not sure people do know what they're getting when they buy it. And it's hard for them to actually figure it out until they're in their living room and they pick up their phone and it doesn't work, right? And I think that's a problem. And then we also have, within the town, we have other things. Internet service providers, Optimum, right? We hardly have anybody but Optimum, right? We've got Frontier that's trying to get back into it. But I think we need to keep our eyes open for that as well, because not only is internet service provision over cables an important thing, Verizon and all the rest of the cellular carriers are trying very hard to get into the internet service provider business, and you know, the streaming, etc. One of their big growth areas is that crowd of high school kids walking down South Avenue, everybody with their phone up, watching Taylor Swift, you know, after school. And it's one of the things that I probably can't relate to, because if you think about cell phone, the kind of cell phone service I use, I have no service at my house, and I live down on Main Street, right down the hill from the antenna's right up here. Why do I have no service? Because of the hill. It goes right over the top of the house. You'd never know that if you walked into my house and used your cell phone, because it would automatically roll over to the internet, right? And it would make an internet call. And I think that's what happens in an awful lot of the town here, is things roll over and you think you've got something you don't really have until you're talking on the phone and you walk out of your house, you climb in your car and you get on the road and you don't have a call, right? And the true test is, can you make a call, right? So we'll come back to that, but just for a minute on how we're organized is there's 9 members on the Utility Commission. And Kathleen did a very good job of helping select members, and they were selected actually with a different process and a different goal. And the goal was to get some people that actually had industry skills in utilities. And so when you take a look at the people that are on the council, we have people that have the equivalent of PhDs in radio frequency design. We have bankers that their life is financing utilities in municipalities across the country. And this is a great thing, I think, because we've got people that can really think about this and really think deeply about it. However, at the same time, this commission is different than other commissions in town. We're not responsible for approving anything. We're responsible for actually doing something. We're responsible for studying something and giving advice to the people that are elected and appointed, that are in charge of actually making the decisions. And it doesn't seem very different than that until you actually say, what projects are we going to work on? Who's going to work on it? And we're expecting people to put a lot of time in on this. And we effectively have no staff support from the town. Now, the town is totally willing to help us, so don't get me wrong. Deanna has been very, very good on helping give us help. But in our first project here, where we're trying to get a drive-by study for cellular phones going, and Kevin had gone a long way toward putting a PO together and getting some vendors in. And so we kind of threw that off to the side and started over again. And it quickly became obvious, we don't know what we're doing. We have never put a PO in place. We have never gotten vendors, and nobody, at least most of the people on the commission, have never have, right? And I just know enough about it to know that we didn't have the skills to do it, and so Tiger has jumped in and helped with that. But it's different, we're just different from the standpoint of, we don't sit there and wait for somebody to come ask for our approval. We have to take the initiative to go out and figure out what to do, and what should the town council want, what should the selectmen want, what should the town want in terms of utilities. And so that's kind of the way we're organizing. And we're organized in 3 areas. We're organized in what we call two-way wireless communications, not just cellular. There's a lot of two-way communications that takes place in this town that is not cellular. The emergency management system is to a large extent wireless, and it's all based on radio. Right, and it's all separate antennas that are distributed across town, and it is not the best thing going either at this point in time, because they have the same kind of coverage problems that is with the cellular system. So we have one person that is in charge of thinking about two-way wireless communications, and that's Krista Canaan. Okay, we have somebody else that is worried about power, and so what does power mean? Power means electricity, and it means natural gas, and it means Eversource. And so we have somebody in charge of that, Mike Collins, who has worked for Eversource for a long time. He actually worked for Yankee Gas. But so he knows the structure, he knows the people, and he's very useful at helping with this. Why would we, I think the cellular thing is the most important. Two-way communication is the most important to us right now. But energy is really an important one as well. And what do we think the important thing is? The important thing is reliability and resilience for the the town system. And so there's several projects going on that right now. And so as we set objectives from a utility standpoint for power, the question really is, what kind of objective should we have for the POCD, the plan of conservation development? What should the reliability be? How would you measure it, and what should it be 10 years from now? And so those are pretty interesting things to think about. And then what projects should we be incenting Eversource to put in place to actually do that? One of the things that we're going to talk about at our utility commission meeting tomorrow night, next Tuesday night, is there's a project going where a citizen has stood up and said, I would really like to head up a project to get the wires in New Canaan buried. And when you think about it, everybody immediately says, oh, it's stupid, it costs way too much money, we're going to live with these telephone poles forever. But when you think through it a little bit, it just doesn't have to be the case. You know, they say it's $1 million a mile, that's way too much. Well, hold on, what if we pay for that mile over 10 years? And it increases the resilience and the reliability of our utility system. As we all have electric cars, right? We're gonna need a lot more power coming into this town, not a lot less, I don't think. The way the grid is set up right now, it is not designed as well as it could be for backup. And some of the stuff that Eversource is working on right now, projects are working on today, is how to get single point of failures that ripple through the system and take a lot of stuff down, how to get those out of the system and have everything have 2 or 3 different backups that immediately click in if it goes there. And so they're working on that today, and that's certainly part of the problem. But you know, one of our biggest problem is trees, right? And it's just flat as trees. And I'm just like everybody else. I live in an old house. I've got 3 trees in front of my house that are this big, and Eversource shows up to take the branches off, and I say, you can't do that. I'm going to chain myself to the tree. You can't do that. And the guy just says, that's fine. Here's the little chart, the little thing you have to sign that says, we told you about it, and you refused to do it, and now you're liable. And so there's a lot of the trees. You talk to Rob Hutchinson, and you say, why are the trees such a problem? And he says, you know, they grow. That's the problem. And you say, I get it. And then the last thing is water and Aquarian. And I don't think there's any kind of problem with Aquarian, but I think in the long term, we need to think about where should we be? How do we protect the aquifer in town? If people are on wells, what are the risks of actually running out of water when we have a drought? How do we make sure we do that? And that's a longer term issue. In the shorter term, Aquarian really needs to replace a lot of water mains. We've all lived with that as they went up Main Street and everything else and ripped up the town. But there are mains in town that are wood that were put in the 1800s that you drink water from today still. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Some of them are wooden.
Wooden. Yeah, wooden. So the person in charge of water is Bernie Clark. And so what have we done with these folks? We've asked these 3 folks to just coordinate what our goals and objectives ought to be, and then including them, everybody else just kind of pitches in on what they're interested in doing and researches. And so we call it our areas of inquiry. What are we going to go worry about? And so, you know, as people think stuff up, and we've got a plan in each area on where we're going to go, and we'll talk about the cellular plan. That's how we're organized. And so we're not a lot of committees. We don't have a whole lot of people to come in and talk to us. We're bringing all of the utility companies in to talk to us about their plans. We've had Eversource in, we've had Aquarian in, we've had Homeland Towers. We're in the process of establishing direct relationships with the cellular companies. We've got contacts at T-Mobile now and Verizon. I still need to get AT&T. And then I don't know whether we need any of the others, but we probably do. And I think dealing directly with the service providers is very important. How do we make them want to do business here? I mean, I can come up with a lot of economic reasons. It's not even worthwhile for them to do business. I don't know why they would invest anything here. And they're not obligated to, right? That's not part of their mandate. And it's interesting when you talk to them, it is important for them to invest here. But it's not because they're making money. The ones I've talked to so far, it is, our job is a service provider, and we want to give the best service to our clients that we can. And so if we're doing business in New Canaan, we want New Canaan to have the best service we can give them. And a sidelight of that is there's an awful lot of people in New Canaan that a very small piece of their mobile communications comes from their personal use. It comes from the companies they're running. We want to very, very much have good reputations with the key executives for large companies when they're buying worldwide cellular service. And so they view that as a very important thing. Anyways, we'll come back to that. So that's how we're organized. We Sven England, and most of you know Sven England, and he is an expert radio wave guy. It's just a random example. He is the co-chairman, and he's doing great on that. So let's now just start to talk about wireless. And I'll go through it and ask me any question you want on the way. I probably won't know the answer, but I'll be glad to give it a try. Is it a utility? We talked about this a little bit. Is it a commercial business? What did I do here? Okay, here we go. In terms of cellular service, the commercial businesses are providing cellular service. Are they willing to provide and invest in New Canaan? And the answer is yes, they are. They want to invest. They want to buy antennas. So it's not like somebody that you need to pay them to come in so that they're interested in town. Is it a vibrant, competitive market? It absolutely is, right? We've got 3 retail stores right down on Elm Street, so willing to sell you cellular service. Is the playing field level? So are these guys really competing with one another? And I would argue that at the town level, it is absolutely level. And they can get as involved and try and put as much antenna up as they want, or pull out, or do whatever they want. Most of the way that the people are authorized to do stuff is at the FCC level, and we all have to march to that. But that's fine. The town really doesn't need to help on this stuff. But if it doesn't help, will we get the service levels we think optimize our real estate values and the value to our residents? And that's a different question. And I think when we go back to the questions when answered by the residents, it is we need better stuff. We do business at home now. We can't go with drop calls on the way to the train station every day. We need this to be better. And so please figure out how to make it better. Okay, so now what's the problem? We all know the residents want wireless service. We all know the companies want to provide it. We know the residents are willing to pay competitive prices for it. That doesn't seem to be a problem. But the residents are unwilling to be welcomed to the infrastructure that is today's infrastructure for providing that service at these prices. And so that's the nut that we have to figure out how to crack, right? And the cost of putting it up appears to be, at least in the eyes of the residents that are impacted by it, disproportionately laid on specific people. The people that end up within 1,000 feet of a tower feel very upset. You can tell that because they show up at the meetings and they sue people and they get them turned off as well as they can. And that's a bit of a problem. And so the question is, how do you address that problem? How do you make people feel more comfortable with it? And I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure we will come across how to do it in the future, and it'll come from 2 ways. One is we'll have better technology that is less offensive for everybody. I don't know when or how to convince people from a health standpoint, but today the health aspect of it, actually, outside of people complaining, isn't holding up the construction of anything, and that's because the FCC has dictated these are the health standards. And if you build it to this standard, they can't stop you effectively. So it's kind of if you follow the rules, nobody can complain. So you can't use that argument in court on why you should not have a cell tower in your backyard. Let's just talk for a minute about the basic. What is cellular telephones and why is it a problem? Cellular telephones are radio waves, right? And so what are the characteristics of radio waves? They go from point to point, and they go from point to point in straight lines, right? And as they go from point to point in a straight line, if something gets in the way, they get stopped. So when you get a hill in the way, they get stopped. When you get a tree in the way, they get stopped. They don't get stopped at the same rate, though, and that's an important aspect of radio waves. The lower the frequency of a radio wave, the more stuff it'll go through. You have a very long radio wave. It'll go through the building, it'll go through cement, it goes through rocks, it goes through hills, it goes through everything. That's why AM radio, it goes everywhere because it doesn't get stopped. However, as you raise the frequency, which is you go from 4 to 5 to 6, the frequency is increasing, and therefore the ability for it to go through things and to travel is reduced. And so you need additional infrastructure as you go from 4 to the 5 to the 6 to light, etc. And that is all because the FCC sells bandwidth through the cellular providers. The cellular providers pay billions of dollars to get the authority to land different radio frequencies in different parts of the country. And as those become more and more precious, because there's only so many of them, so much of it, that becomes why they've moved up in frequency. Being in higher frequency is not better, it's actually more difficult to deal with. But it's available, and it has been available, so that's why it sits there. Okay, and we talked about that, Okay, one other important point here when it comes to towers is the federal government and our state government very much wants to encourage the growth in cellular use because it will motivate economic growth. And it can be an inhibitor to economic growth if they're not doing it. And therefore, it's a little bit, and I hate to equate these two, but it's a little bit like affordable housing. And so when you get to the state level, their immediate answer is put the tower up. Not a 100-foot tower, but a 180-foot tower, because that'll talk to more people. And so it's very much like affordable housing, which if you get out of the town rules and go to the state rules, there's very little sympathy for what a tower looks like. The health stuff, very little sympathy there, and most of the answer is you go there, you do. And so if you take a look at this map, and this is the coverage back in 2014 for Verizon, and it's 850 megahertz. Okay, and you can see that this is downtown. How little coverage there is up here, right? And this is Waveney Park, so here's where the water towers are. We get a little bit of coverage out of the Stanford Tower over here. Here's Poundridge up here. Really nothing comes in. A little bit from Vista comes in the corner here. The Armory down here, that would put some up here. So this is the chart with what was actually operating in 2014. This is the chart of what they projected would the coverage would be when Silver Hill, which has now been added, has been added. This is what they projected would be added. The Armory, once it was up and operating, and I don't believe it did that, it would project this way. Stanford is no different. There's really nothing else up here, right? And so this is why everybody's.
What about the Soundview Tower, which was added after those two?
Well, we'll come back to that, but the Soundview Tower is a solution up here. The Soundview Tower, that's why the Soundview Tower was important, and that's why that location was chosen. St. Luke's was kind of the epicenter for where people thought it should go. The Country Club in this one was not up and operating at that point. Country Club covers here, right? So this part of town has gotten coverage via, I think they've added antennas at Silver Hill as well as the Country Club as well as Saturday. The one that was asked about of me a little bit earlier was 1837 Ponus Ridge Road. And that has been approved by the Siting Council. It sits right about here, okay, and does great coverage for here, and I'll show you what the coverage it does on a map in a little bit. But
it's been reversed in court.
Well, let me address that. What happened was one of the abutters sued the Siting Council to stop the construction. So sued it on two bases. One basis was they didn't do enough analysis on wetlands, on the geography, etc. Not enough ecological study. But the second one, which was very interesting, was they said the people that are on the Siting Commission are not the same people that the law that authorized the Siting Commission to use. Specifically, the law said there was only supposed to be one person that had a background or career in the industry.
Is the Siting Council a state?
It's a state council. It's state. So there's only supposed to be one person that has worked for a cellular firm or has worked in regulations of the cellular firm. And there's two. And so when the judge saw this, the judge immediately said, you know, we studied this enough, this guy's right. They don't have a valid counsel to make this decision, so it's invalid. So go figure out what you're gonna do. You don't have authorization anymore. So now the authorization is deferred. That happened about 2 weeks ago. And so I've talked to Homeland Tower, which is the tower company trying to build it. Said, what are you doing? And they said, we don't know yet. We're talking to our lawyers. That's what we're doing. You know? We all got in the Utilities Commission, we got a letter from the complainer, right? And he said, here's the reason I'm complaining. I want to make sure you understand it. And I thought that was terrific. And he brought it to our attention that it had been turned over.
So it's a delay tactic, really. I mean, they can
Sure.
reconstitute the commission.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure,
Right?
sure.
5 minutes.
Okay, let me just, yeah, okay, we'll just about through most of this stuff. Okay, let's do the following. So here's how the commission is attacking the coverage system. First of all, we're trying to reset the coverage to modern day, right? It's now 2024, it's not 2014 anymore. Let's see what the coverage really is. And we are signing, I believe, a contract with Ookla today, which is a data company whose whole business is measuring cellular coverage for providers. And so they're going to be here in June, and hopefully they'll do a drive-by test, which is done with a different strategy than all these other drive-by tests have been. The drive-by test that this is done by, it's interesting because they don't really test whether you can make a call, they test whether there's signal landing on the car. So a car puts an antenna on top and drives down the road, 30 miles an hour, takes a check every second and says, is there power on the car? Is there enough power to run a cellular phone? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And that's how they do it. Well, the guys that we've hired to do this don't do that. What they do is actually make a call. So they'll have six cell phones or 8 cell phones in their car as they're driving, and those make a call every second, and they make a data call as well as a voice call. And then so they know, at least at that point in time, and you go forward in a second at 30 miles an hour, I think it's 40 feet, we'll have another point that says you can make a call here or not. And when the terrain changes, it can make a difference. So you look at these lines and say, well, that's pretty good. I can do it here, do it here. It's very possible that you can't do it 10 feet from where you're standing, right? It's just very possible. The other thing that you don't get when you get the power landing, you don't prove you can actually hook up because of all of that bandwidth is being used by somebody else. It might be there, but it's not available, right? Because it's already full. And so that's the advantage of what we're trying to put together. What are we going to do with that? We're going to go back and say, first of all, where does it get us the most bang for the buck to increase our coverage and figure that out? How do we get the most residents and the most residencies done? And by the way, the test we're going to have, we should be able to do this not in this very gross manner, but say, Rich, you live at 34 White Oak Shade. Let's look at your house. And we'll be able to tell within that kind of granularity whether there's coverage or not. And by the way, who's covering it? Is it AT&T? Is it Verizon? Is it T-Mobile? And so that's what we're trying to get as a base to start from. Secondly, we'll use that, and we will go back to the people that are currently providing infrastructure today, and see if there's a way that we can do something that will increase the value of that infrastructure and coverage. An example would be the Armory. We'll go not even to Canaan, right? We'll go back to the Armory owner and say we would like to see what we can do with you to get more coverage going up 123. So that's the second thing. The country club, can we increase the country club stuff, right? And so that's the second thing. And the third thing is we will try and put together and we'll try and understand technology better on how soon can we actually have an advantage from technology. And we can break that into a network, part of the network system and understand what that should be. And then one that I didn't mention, but we're trying to come up with a number of what I call hacks. And that is, you got a problem, you're on a 4 acre lot and you don't have coverage, so you can't call 911, right? That's a big problem, you can't call 911. Well, what can you do about that? Well, you can call 911, you could call 911 on the internet, if the internet is up. If it's not up, you couldn't call home. But you know what? 911 doesn't work on an internet call. you need a 10-digit number for 911 to have it work. It works on a cellular call. And so one of the things that we will try and get done is we get a 10-digit number for 911 in the Canaan, so that this works, right? The second thing is, when you move in, you could say to yourself, well, maybe, I don't really have that great a cellular coverage. Maybe I need to spruce up my internet coverage. You could go and buy a Starlink and get a Starlink subscription, and it would be good anywhere in town. The coverage on it gives you a 300-foot diameter Wi-Fi spot in your yard or in your house, and there's plenty of capacity out there. They're fighting a war on it in Ukraine, And by the way, so when the satellites are over us, they're empty. I guarantee that, relative to the other side of the earth. But those are just a couple of things. So we want to come up with things like that, where it's like drilling a well and you don't have water. What else can you do to offset this? And just make people understand it. And John, make sellers and buyers understand it. You move here, you got a well, you got a septic system. You're liable to have a Starlink if you really want to have surety of communication. Anyways, that's in, I'm sure.
Rich, thank you.